Good morning. Greet you on this beautiful Wednesday morning as we continue the travels of Paul and his witnessing to the wonder and power of Jesus Christ and the message that he sent us. So I just want to do a little review before I do this chapter 19 of Acts. I'm going to be starting at the 21st verse, but then going to the end of the chapter. So it's a chunk. But what we know is that Paul's been in Ephesus for 3 years. He's been teaching, and sometimes it's in a village outside of Ephesus, and has been, for Paul, the way is what he calls Christianity. That it wasn't just one concept, but it was a way of living, and so he got to where he called it that. Also that Ephesus is a huge city. It's a very diverse city. It's really in many ways a rich city for its day. And what's just happened is that there were a lot of what scripture calls sorcerers and witchcraft people who made their living that way. And Paul has convinced them to give that up, to live differently. And so they have surrendered their livelihood. And it says in the scripture that there was a lot of money involved. So the next thing that happens, and what I'm going to be reading, is about those who made their living because Ephesus had a particular stone of the goddess Artemis. Again, Greek goddess of war and hunt and wildlife. And so Artemis, whose Roman counterpart was Diana. Anyway, so this goddess is somebody who has a sacred stone at Ephesus, and they make a lot of money, a livelihood of people, pilgrims coming to visit the shrine there. So that's kind of where we pick up. That's the backstory. I'll start at verse 21 and hopefully be able to make it through this reading. After all of this, again, the sorcerers and witchcraft and all those people signing on board with the way and giving up their livelihood. After all of this had reached its peak, Paul decided that it was time to move on to Macedonia and Arcadia provinces, and from there to Jerusalem. Then he said, I'm going off to Rome. I've got to see Rome. He sent his 2 assistants, Timothy and Arius, on to Macedonia, and they stayed there for a while and wrapped things up in Asia. But before he got away, a huge ruckus occurred over what was now being referred to as the Way. A certain silversmith, Demetrius, conducted a brisk business in the manufacture of shrines to the goddess Artemis, employing a number of artisans in his business. He rounded up his workers and others similarly employed and said, Men, you know well that we have a good thing going here, and you've seen how Paul has barged in and discredited what we're doing by telling people that there's no such thing as a God made with hands. A lot of people are going along with him, not only here in Ephesus, but all through the Asian province. Not only is our little business in danger of falling apart, but the temple of our famous goddess Artemis will certainly end up in a pile of rubble as her glorious reputation fades to nothing. And this is no mere local matter. The whole world worships Artemis. That set them off in a frenzy. They ran into the streets yelling, Great Artemis of the Ephesians! Great Artemis of the Ephesians! And they put the whole city in an uproar, stampeding into the stadium and grabbing 2 of Paul's associates on the way, the Macedonian Gaius and Archias. Paul wanted to go in, but the disciples wouldn't let him. Prominent religious leaders in the city who became friendly to Paul concurred. By no means go near that great mob. Some were yelling one thing, some another. Most of them had no idea what was going on or why they were there. As the Jews pushed Alexander to the front to try to gain control, different factions clamored to get him on their side. But he brushed them off and quieted the mob with an impressive sweep of his arms. But the moment he opened his mouth and they knew that he was a Jew, they shouted him down, Great Artemis of the Ephesians, Great Artemis of the Ephesians, and on for over 2 hours. finally, the town clerk got the mob quieted down and said, "Fellow citizens, is there anyone anywhere who doesn't know that our dear city, Ephesus, is the protector of the glorious Artemis and her sacred stone image that fell out of the heaven? Since this is beyond contradiction, you had better get a hold of yourselves. This conduct is unworthy of Artemis. These men you've dragged in here have done nothing to harm our temple or our goddess. And if Demetrius and his guild of artisans have a complaint, they can take it to court and make all the accusations they want. If anything else is bothering you, bring it to the regular scheduled town meeting and let it be settled there. There's no excuse for what's happening here today. We put our city in serious danger. Rome, remember, doesn't look kindly on rioters." With that, he sent them all home. So I think this is just a great look at the ancient world, that and how we haven't changed from the ancient world. So this man who's afraid of losing his livelihood, of losing money, is going to make sure that Paul is shut down. And of course, Paul is out there, saying that the gods that are made with human hands, which is all of the Greek mythological pantheon, they want him to stop. And they not only want him to stop, they want to discredit him, because it looks like he is on his way to Jerusalem. It says he's on his way to Jerusalem, and then he's hoping to go to Rome. But and in Jerusalem, it's thought that he was going to take an offering. Again, this is from some of his letters, to the church in Jerusalem, because it was very poor. And so he was going to gather from other Christians an offering for basically home base, which was Jerusalem. But even as he's doing that and trying to get on his way, this group wants to make sure that Paul is put to shame and shown to not to have any power, and that Artemis, which is the goddess of their city, which again, pilgrims come to see and pay money to come and see the shrine. And maybe not particular, well, they give offerings at the shrine. But also they buy little tchotchkes, little statues and things to take home with them. And so these artisans who do statues of Artemis are doing a roaring business, and they don't want it gone. And so they cause a riot. First, they will not listen to a Jew because he's not them. And the Jews are the people that they're having problems with. Remember that those folks who saw these new Christians were really identifying them as Jewish, because mostly it was at this time a reform movement within Judaism. But other than that, they were causing just this riot. It says that many in the crowd didn't even know what they were yelling about. They were just there yelling. And you think about the crowds that we've seen in recent years, and a lot of them have a concept in their mind about what they're yelling about, but probably don't know the true issues that they're yelling about. So apparently that was always true in humankind. Mobs get going, people say inflammatory remarks such as, Artemis's shrine is going to end up in rubble. Well, there's no evidence of that, and there's no evidence that their trade is going to completely dry up. But I think it would seem logical to me that they were worried because those who had done a brisk trade in healings and, just whether it was telling the future or whatever those sorcerers were doing, a lot of them gave up that trade because of Paul's conviction. So this man is trying to make sure that it doesn't get into his profession of making small little representations of the goddess Artemis. And I like that the scripture says, yeah, half the crowd didn't really know what they were yelling about, but they were just yelling. And they weren't listening to somebody who was on the other side of it, who they identified as the enemy, no matter what he said. So Alexander, as a Jew, no matter what he said, they were going to shout him down and not listen to any other thing but their own voice. Again, I think of crowds today, and I think of people today who only want to hear what they want to hear. And then finally, it's the town clerk. And apparently this man, according to William Barclay studies, he was really more than a town clerk. He was kind of the, not the governor, but he was the man who was trying to keep civil order. And if, in fact, he had not kept civil order and it had caused enough problems that Rome had been notified, he could have lost his job. Again, an aside, one of the things we know is that Pontius Pilate had gotten into trouble with Caesar and the Roman authorities in his last couple of appointments of a job. And it's one of the reasons he was sent to Judea, which was like, yeah, nobody wants to go there. Yeah, send him there. Yeah, whatever. And so Pontius Pilate was on he was on probation. Let's put it that way. And if he got in trouble again, he knew that there was a chance that he wouldn't get another appointment. And so some authorities think that it's one of the reasons that he went along with everybody, because he was just trying to keep the peace and trying to keep his job. Again, one of the things I love about reading through the scripture and really talking with you guys about it is that it's just also very mundane when you get down to it. People were worried about losing their livelihood. People were worried about losing their jobs. And so they did things to ensure that this new religious fad, as far as they could see, didn't compromise the money that was coming into their household. And again, we all need a livelihood. We all need a way to make money. And so for them, it was just very logical to do what they had grown up with, which for Demetrius, it was to provide a service of giving people a token of Artemis as they came on pilgrimage to her shrine. Again, so all of this seems to be pretty mundane, but you know, I love using the message, and one of the things I like is Eugene Peterson's translation of this last verse, or about the last verse. It says, if anything else is bothering you, bring it to the regular scheduled town meeting, and it'll be settled there. And I think about how often we kind of do that. You know, if you've got an issue, then bring it to the meeting that is supposed to handle it. Don't not that any churches of mine ever spread gossip, but I've known in the past, the way past, that there have been issues in churches. And what I learned very early in my ministry was there was a thing that was called the parking lot meeting. And people, rather than discussing it at the meeting inside, they would discuss it in the parking lot, which to me was not a healthy, good way to deal with church business. And hopefully we had ways of dealing with church business or disagreements or people who saw things differently within the context of a meeting that we were trying to seek a way forward with God. And so here the town clerk wants to keep peace in order to not get Rome down on his case and in order not to endanger his job. Hopefully, for those of us who believe in Jesus Christ and know our scriptures, we try to keep peace because it's what we've been asked to be kind to people, to see their perspective, to try to understand where they're coming from, and to know that because our relationship with God is a matter of our heart and conscience, that no one can take that away from us. And so we don't have to, hopefully, get crazy and angry and yell, you know, as they were. Artemis, what is it? I had to say it 4 times. It seems like I would remember. Great Artemis of the Ephesians, you know, great God of the whatever. But hopefully we don't end up yelling at each other. And here, the people who are around Paul keep him out of danger. When he would have gone in, we know he would have gone in. He's gone into lots of dangerous situations and just continued to preach the good news, to make argument for who God is. But what probably his fellow Christians knew was that they weren't in a place where they were listening to well-reasoned discussion or arguments even. They were in the frenzy of a mob, which is not a place to change anyone's opinion. So they kept Paul safe. And as they kept Paul safe, he goes on in the next chapter in 20 to continue traveling. But right now we have these verses of people who were upset that if too many people became these wild and crazy new people of the way who didn't believe in gods that could be fashioned in human hands, that their livelihood would suffer. It's amazing how much of the Bible really is about economics. So there you are on this beautiful Wednesday morning. Prayers and peace be with you, and thank you for sharing it with me. Bye.